Everything you've been told about selfishness is a lie. We're going to show you why being selfish is the most generous thing you can do. Welcome back to the Sidebar. Inherited knowledge tells you the stove is hot. Earned knowledge is the blister that changes how you cook. Why are you still living on other people's warnings? Today, we're shifting from wondering what if to gathering evidence. Using two posts by artist Jeremy Brunansky, we're redefining failure as pure data collection. Stop fearing the loud crash of a mistake. Start fearing the quiet ache of never trying. By the end of today's deep dive, you'll understand exactly how to weaponize a calculated, positive selfishness to elevate everyone around you. Grab your coffee, tea, or wine. It's time for episode 10 of The Sidebar.
Welcome in, everyone. Pull up a chair, get comfortable, and let's get right into it. I am talking directly to you today. Yes, you, the endlessly curious learner who decided to take a little time out of your day to join us at the table.
We know you could be doing a million other things right now.
Exactly. You could be prepping for that big afternoon meeting or catching up on industry news or just, scrolling through the endless void of the internet.
But you're here.
But you're here. And we have a mission today that is going to make this specific hour of your life incredibly worthwhile. Today, we are going on an exploration into the art of saying yes to new experiences.
And we're going to fundamentally redefine what you think of as success and failure.
Right. And perhaps most surprisingly, we are going to unlock the hidden, almost counterintuitive power of what we're calling positive selfishness.
Which is a huge concept.
It's massive. Now, I want to be clear right out of the gate. This isn't going to be your generic platitude-filled self-help seminar. We are not here to tell you to just believe in yourself and magically expect things to happen.
No, absolutely not.
We are looking at real-world philosophy, lived, messy human experience, and figuring out how to directly, tangibly improve your day-to-day life.
Exactly. We're looking for actionable insights drawn from a very specific, highly textured set of source materials.
Yeah, and the sources today they're wildly interesting.
They really are. Today's deep dive is anchored by a collection of incredibly fascinating documents. We have two highly introspective philosophical blog posts written by a man named Jeremy Brunansky back in the summer and fall of 2014.
Almost a decade ago now.
Right. One is titled Chapters, We Turn the Page, and the other asks a rather provocative question: is being selfish a negative all the time?
A great question.
Alongside these essays, we have a comprehensive professional and creative reference guide detailing Brunansky's rather extraordinary, multifaceted background. And to top it all off, we have a striking, slightly surreal photograph that serves as a visual anchor for everything we are going to discuss.
Okay, let's unpack this, because when I first looked at the stack of sources, I honestly didn't know how they all fit together.
I had the exact same reaction.
Right, you've got philosophical musings on childhood, a resume that reads like 3 different people lived it, and a picture of a turntable on a beach.
It seems completely disjointed at first glance.
It really does. But the deeper I read, the more I realize there is a brilliant unifying thread here. By the end of this deep dive, you, listening to this right now, might just walk away looking at your past failures, the ones that still make you wince a little at 2 in the morning, as your absolute greatest assets.
And even wilder, you might actually want to be a little more selfish in your daily routine.
It is a profound shift in perspective.
What we are going to do today is connect the dots between childhood rebellion, high-level artificial intelligence, ancient philosophy, and that record player sitting in the wet sand.
It's quite the journey.
We are going to synthesize these seemingly disparate elements to show you how a wildly cross-functional life is not just possible, but potentially the key to deep personal fulfillment.
So let's start at the very beginning. Let's dive right into this first blog post from September 2014, Chapters. We turn the page.
That's the one that really sets the foundation.
Yeah. Brunansky starts by reflecting on his childhood mindset. He describes life as a young person as this incredibly simple formula. It is just a massive list of do's and don'ts.
You're born into a world where the rules are already written by authorities.
Right. Parents, teachers, society at large. But he admits that he constantly leaned toward the don'ts. He was endlessly curious about the actual level of danger those authorities were warning him about.
That curiosity is the engine of human progress, right there in a childhood anecdote. It is the refusal to accept a boundary simply because it has been drawn.
I love how he frames it.
Think about how we pathologize boundary testing in kids. We call it acting out, being difficult, or rebellion. But Brunansky argues it's essentially empirical research.
Empirical research, yeah.
How do you read his internal monologue of asking, but is the consequence really that bad?
It reads like an engineer stress testing a bridge, honestly. He's not trying to break the rules to be malicious.
Not at all.
He openly admits this mentality added a whole new level of stress to his family because they realized early on that the status quo was simply never going to be enough for him. His life was destined to be a constant adventure. But I can imagine a listener thinking, isn't that just being a difficult kid? Why is this specific internal monologue so important to building a philosophy as an adult?
What's fascinating here is that when we analyze this from a developmental standpoint, it is fundamentally about the pursuit of knowledge through experience.
Right.
This child isn't rebelling for the sake of rebellion. He is conducting a deeply empirical risk assessment algorithm. He is testing the structural integrity of the reality presented to him.
I never thought about it like that.
This psychology of boundary testing is crucial. Pushing past the rules imposed by authorities is actually a foundational step in developing a lifelong adventuring mindset. It is the transition from accepting inherited knowledge to forging earned knowledge.
Earned knowledge versus inherited knowledge. That's a vital distinction. Inherited knowledge is your parents telling you the stove is hot. Earned knowledge is the blister on your finger that ensures you deeply, viscerally understand the concept of heat.
Precisely. And if we look at the adult life of the listener, how much of your daily routine is based on inherited knowledge?
Probably way too much of it.
How many boundaries do you respect at work or in your relationships simply because someone else drew them there years ago? Brunansky's childhood tendency to test the don'ts evolved as an adult into a framework for dismantling those invisible walls.
You can clearly see that evolution in the text. In the post, he reflects on growing older and making bolder choices. He mentions that this would often frustrate those closest to him.
Because it's uncomfortable to watch someone break the mold.
Exactly. Because he didn't always know how to convey his internal feelings at the time, he would sometimes come across as almost apathetic to the people around him. But internally, the reality was completely different. Internally, he was just incredibly thankful to take a chance, even if that chance ended in total failure.
And that brings us to one of the most vital insights in this entire text: the reframing of failure.
There is a quote here that really stood out to me. He writes, "The truth is, I was more thankful that I had taken the chance and failed than to have lived a life in wonder."
A powerful sentiment.
He goes on to say that he didn't experience the frustration that typically comes from failure because, in his mind, he never missed an opportunity. He was just proud that he tried, took the risk, and had the experience. But that sounds incredibly difficult in practice. How does someone actually suppress the natural, very human fear of failure in the moment?
It requires a complete rewiring of how you measure outcomes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, to the life of the person listening right now, this is a radical departure from how most of us operate.
Yeah, completely radical.
We are conditioned to view failure as a strict negative, a deficit, a mark against our permanent record. But here, the contrast being drawn is not between success and failure. The contrast is between the temporary frustration of failure and the permanent, suffocating paralysis of missed opportunities.
So it's about shifting the weight of the dread. You have to make the dread of wondering what if heavier than the dread of looking foolish.
Exactly. Let's break down the mechanics of this, the actual scientific method applied to personal living that he is hinting at. Think about your own life for a second.
Okay.
Let's say you have a radical idea for a new project at work, something that totally breaks the mold. The inherited knowledge tells you not to pitch it because if it gets rejected, you look bad, you fail. Most people choose the safety of wondering what if over the temporary sting of that rejection.
We choose the quiet ache of stagnation because it feels safer than the loud crash of a mistake.
We absolutely do.
It's so much easier to sit at your desk and say, I could have run that project better than my boss, than to actually pitch the idea, fall flat on your face in the boardroom, and have to admit your idea wasn't fully baked at that moment.
But if you apply Brunansky's framework, you strip the emotion out of the boardroom rejection. A failed pitch isn't a reflection of your worth, it is simply data. You ran an experiment.
Right.
The hypothesis was this project will be approved. The result was it was not approved. Now look at the data. Why wasn't it approved? Was the budget too high? Was the timing wrong? Did you fail to communicate the vision? You still know more than you did before you ran the test. You possess earned knowledge about the pitch process.
He is challenging us to view the end game, the actual result of the attempt, as fundamentally less important than the personal pride of simply taking the risk. He literally says, how much better are we knowing more today than yesterday? What a grand time to be alive.
That is pure, unadulterated enthusiasm for the simple act of experiencing things, regardless of the outcome.
This mindset entirely neutralizes the fear of failure. It transforms it into just another form of data collection. And when you are constantly collecting data, constantly running these personal experiments, your mind inevitably expands, which leads directly to his next major philosophical point.
Right, let's follow that thread because this leads into his concept of the mind expanding, and it is fascinating.
He talks about this awakening that happens within ourselves when our choices push us into new moments or new ideas. He states that once an idea is placed into our mind, we are never the same. We are forever changed. The idea expands the mind, and you can literally never go back to the way of thinking you had before that idea was introduced.
Irreversibility of cognitive expansion is a profound concept. The brain is not a hard drive where you can just delete a file and regain the exact same empty space. Once the architecture of a thought is built, the landscape is permanently altered.
And what is most striking is his assertion that this happens even if the idea is inherently flawed.
That was the part that made me stop and reread the paragraph.
He says, even if the idea is ridiculous, your mind now processes the ridiculous in a fresh new way. I think that is a deeply liberating thought. You don't just have to consume good ideas or right ideas to grow. Exposing yourself to the absurd, the contradictory, the completely outrageous, it all stretches the canvas of your mind.
But we have to ask, what is the practical application of this? Why would you intentionally expose yourself to the ridiculous or the contradictory?
Well, looking at his brain box section of his sidebar reference sheet, he clearly practices what he preaches. If you want to see what a mind looks like when it has been intentionally expanded by diverse, sometimes contradicting ideas, you look at this list of his key literary and philosophical references.
It's an incredible list.
We are not just talking about a casual reading list here. We are talking about foundational psychological theories from Carl Jung, right alongside the political and social contracts of John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Let's unpack that juxtaposition. Why read both Locke and Rousseau? For those who might need a quick refresher, John Locke fundamentally believed in natural rights, life, liberty, and property, and argued that human beings are largely rational and capable of governing themselves through a social contract.
While Rousseau had a very different take.
Rousseau, on the other hand, argued that society actually corrupts the inherent goodness of humanity, famously stating that man is born free and everywhere he is in chains.
They are looking at the exact same subject, human nature and society, from completely different angles. And it doesn't stop there. He's got Marcus Aurelius, the ultimate Stoic, who focused on internal control and accepting the universe as it is, sitting on the same list as Niccolò Machiavelli.
The ultimate pragmatic, ruthless political strategist who focused on manipulating external circumstances to gain power.
This raises an important question for the listener. Why consume such vastly different ideologies? Why read Rousseau, who believed in the inherent goodness of humanity, and then immediately read Machiavelli, who essentially argued that humans are inherently self-interested and must be managed through power and fear?
I'd imagine it's about avoiding the trap of thinking there's only one way to look at a problem. If you only read Marcus Aurelius, you might become so focused on internal acceptance that you fail to take action in the real world. If you only read Machiavelli, you become a paranoid manipulator.
Exactly. Absorbing all these perspectives without necessarily adopting one as your absolute gospel truth forces the brain to process human nature in incredibly complex, nuanced ways. It prevents ideological rigidity.
You learn to see the stoicism required to handle a modern business failure, while also recognizing the Machiavellian tactics a competitor might be using in a negotiation. You're building a cognitive toolkit that can handle the full spectrum of the human experience.
It's like cross-training for the brain. And he doesn't just do this with political philosophy. He applies that same diversity to history, strategy, and even transcendentalism. He mentions Baruch Spinoza.
Oh yes, Spinoza.
Spinoza was a 17th century philosopher who argued that God and nature are the exact same thing, a very unified, incredibly rational, almost mathematical view of the universe. But then on the exact same reading list, Bernansky places Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Emerson, a leading figure of the transcendentalist movement.
Right. A movement that was all about messy, wild, individual intuition over cold logic. By placing Spinoza and Emerson next to each other in his brain box, Brunansky is deliberately forcing his mind to reconcile raw logic with human intuition.
He's synthesizing opposites.
He's also reading Aristotle, Socrates, Plato. He lists Roger Crowley, the historian of maritime empires, Bob Iger, the legendary CEO of Disney, John Lewis Gaddis, the Cold War historian, Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher and writer of the Tao Te Ching, Kautilya, the ancient Indian polymath and military strategist.
It is like he is building a round table of the greatest minds across millennia and just sitting back to listen to them argue.
And the result of that kind of intellectual diet is a mind that becomes highly sensitive to its own stagnation. When you are constantly absorbing the dynamic forces of history, philosophy, and strategy, remaining still feels unnatural. Which brings us back to the 2014 blog post. This massive accumulation of perspectives eventually demanded a change in his physical circumstances.
In that post, he reveals a deeply personal struggle. He says that over the past 3 months, he had taken a course in life that he normally would never do. He had this massive internal conflict.
The logic versus heart debate.
The logic in his brain was screaming, "Don't act a fool." He knew the risks. But his heart, his expanded mind, decided otherwise. He realized that life is meant to be an ongoing experience. If you are feeling stagnant, you have to actively change your experience, even if the logic center of your brain is waving red flags.
The phrase he uses to describe that stagnation is powerful. You failed yourself in that we are stagnant. This is a stark realization. The only true failure in his philosophy is not trying and missing the mark. It is not moving at all. We talked earlier about redefining failure as data collection. Here, he defines the absence of data collection as the ultimate failure.
To hammer that home, he quotes George Bernard Shaw. "Progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything." And then he turns the lens outward.
He asks the reader, he asks you, the listener, a very direct, slightly uncomfortable question about your daily routine. He asks, how is your life? Are you embracing life to the fullest and shouting to sky, "I'm ready for another day"? Or are you waking up and hoping that the day passes and you go unnoticed to strangers because you prefer the attention of your loved ones over anything else?
And crucially, he adds that both options are actually okay. He's not judging the quiet life versus loud life. He's not saying everyone needs to be out leading maritime empires or writing philosophical treatises.
No, not at all.
What he is evaluating is the passion behind your choice. Whether you are living large on a global stage or quietly cherishing your family and immediate circle in a small town, the passion must be present. You must be deeply engaged with the life you have chosen.
If you are just going through the motions, hoping the day passes unnoticed so you can get back to sleep, that is the stagnation he is warning against. Are you actively participating in your day, or are you just surviving it? He writes, play to a life that motivates, stimulates, and challenges your status quo. Even if the matters you challenge are small, you're finding a new idea of life that you didn't have before.
When you realize that staying stagnant is the only real failure, it completely changes how you view your identity. It actually makes me think of that visual source in his file, the photograph, that perfectly visually proves he refuses to stay stagnant in one single category.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Listeners, since this is audio, I need you to build this image in your mind's eye. It is a photograph of a classic wood-paneled record player, a turntable. It's the kind of delicate analog equipment you treat with immense care, but it is not sitting in a cozy mid-century modern living room next to a stack of vintage vinyl.
No, far from it.
It is sitting directly on the wet sand of a beach. Right behind it, you can see the ocean waves crashing and coming in. And draped over the electronics hanging off the sides of this wooden turntable is literal seaweed.
It is a striking, jarring image. It is a deliberate, almost violent collision of indoor, delicate analog technology and the raw, untamed, corrosive power of nature.
It is so bizarre and evocative. My first reaction was, why put a record player in the sand? It makes no logical sense. The salt water would ruin the mechanics. The sand would destroy the needle. It's an engineer's nightmare. But as a piece of art, as a metaphorical statement, it is incredibly powerful.
Let's analyze this metaphorically, using his own words as the cipher. In the chapter's post, he explicitly lists his constants, the foundational elements he knows will never change about himself. He writes, I'll always love the beach. I'll always love music and theater, being creative, and being around those of the creative nature.
Right.
This photograph is not just a random artistic shot. It is a literal visual manifestation of his core identity. He is taking the two pillars of his existence and forcing them into the same frame.
He is combining the things he loves most, even if society says they don't conventionally belong together. A record player belongs inside. The beach is outside. He says, no, I'm bringing my music to the water. It is a visual representation of saying yes to merging your passions. And when you look at his sidebar reference sheet, you see that this concept of combining unexpected elements isn't just a photography project, it is the blueprint of his entire life.
It truly is. The diversity in his professional and creative identity is staggering, and it mirrors that exact juxtaposition of the mechanical and the organic. We are looking at a person who has nearly 40 years of tenure in the performing arts. He started acting, singing, dancing, and playing classical piano at approximately 5 years old.
5 years old.
He was a music major with a vocal performance emphasis at Glendale Community College. He plays classical guitar, jazz, and Latin percussion.
Right, so you have this deeply artistic, expressive, musical soul, someone who understands rhythm, narrative, and human emotion on a profound level. But then you look at his technical training. He is a graduate of the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences. He is heavily involved in studio recording and filmmaking as a writer, director, and producer. And this is the part that really made me do a double take. He holds certifications as a Google AI professional and in AI digital marketing.
The cross-functional life. This is the human equivalent of the record player on the beach. Think about the mindset required for a Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences graduate. You are dealing with precise frequencies, acoustic physics, the literal math of sound.
Very analytical.
Now, place that exact same brain on a stage performing classical theater, where success relies on raw, unpredictable human emotion. Most of us think those two brains cannot exist in the same skull. We tell ourselves, I'm a math person or I'm a creative person. We bifurcate our lives. Brunansky's resume proves that is a false dichotomy.
He refuses to choose. He builds a life where both the artistic and the algorithmic can exist simultaneously. And it doesn't stop with his education. We spent a lot of time on his philosophical influences, but his fiction and graphic narrative references are just as vital to understanding this cross-functional mindset. He balances heavy political philosophy with comic book mythology.
Mythology is the operative word there. Comic books are modern myth-making.
Exactly. He lists the Silver Surfer, Batman, Green Lantern, Moon Knight, Doctor Strange, the Defenders, the Fantastic Four, and the Shadow. He reads Amy Tan, Claudia Gray, Charles Soule, and Ernest Hemingway. He draws inspiration from a massive list of visionary filmmakers: Alfred Hitchcock, Martin Scorsese, Ron Howard, David Lynch, Werner Herzog, James Cameron, Federico Fellini, Akira Kurosawa, Steven Spielberg, John Hughes, Jon Favreau, Mel Brooks, and Tim Burton.
Let's spend a moment analyzing the contrasting styles in that list of directors because it mirrors the Spinoza and Emerson contrast we discussed earlier. He is drawing inspiration from Akira Kurosawa, a master of sweeping, epic, deeply historical visual grandeur. But he's also pulling from David Lynch, who is the master of the surreal, the subconscious, the deeply unsettling and intimate.
And he throws in Mel Brooks for pure, unadulterated satire and John Hughes for grounded, coming-of-age emotional resonance.
What we are observing here is the deliberate construction of a polymath. He is pulling narrative pacing from Hitchcock, visual scale from Kurosawa, existential angst from the Silver Surfer, and the technical mechanisms of artificial intelligence, and synthesizing them into a unique worldview.
It's incredible.
And this synthesis is not just for internal amusement, it feeds directly into his professional identity.
Yeah.
His summary states he is a frontline leader with 20-plus years of cross-functional experience leading individuals, departments, sites, and projects. His unique edge is literally defined as combining deep technical AI fluency and leadership with a rich background in the arts and entertainment.
Think about how valuable that is in the modern workforce. If you are leading a team integrating AI into a marketing campaign, you don't just need someone who understands the code. You need someone who understands narrative, pacing, and human emotion, things he learned from Hitchcock and the theater stage. That is how you stand out, by not being just one thing.
It gives you a completely different lens on problem solving.
And he feeds this cross-functional identity physically, too. He's traveled to nearly all 50 U.S. states. He's been to Mexico, Canada, South Africa, the Netherlands, Germany, and Poland. He pushes himself athletically, completing 2 brutal Spartan races, a Super 10K and a Beast 21K. He loves his dogs. He loves his partner, Virginia, whose own background is a beautiful mix of Caribbean, Italian, and Venezuelan. Everything about his life is an amalgamation of different cultures, disciplines, and experiences.
I want the listener to really look at their own life right now. Look at your own resume. Look at your browser history. How often do you silo your own interests? How often do you think, well, I work in corporate finance, so my interest in abstract painting is just a silly hobby that I should keep off my LinkedIn profile? We are taught to present a streamlined, highly categorized version of ourselves to the world.
We curate our identities to fit the job description.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But what this deep dive suggests is that your completely different interests are not distractions. They are the very components that can form your unique edge. If you work in finance but deeply understand abstract art, you might see patterns in market data that a purely linear thinker would miss. How can you bring your record player to your beach? How would your career change if you allowed your hidden passions to inform your professional output? This is what saying yes to life actually looks like on paper. It is the refusal to be categorized.
It reminds me of the quote he pulled from the Arizona lottery in his blog post. You can't win if you don't play. If you keep your record player safely in the living room, you'll never know what it looks like against the backdrop of the ocean. You have to put your ideas, your passions out into the wild and see what happens. You have to play the game.
And playing the game of life, fully and passionately, requires an understanding of what actually motivates us to act. We've talked about boundary testing, expanding the mind, and merging passions. But what is the fuel for all of this? Which brings us to a fascinating turn in his philosophy, outlined in the second blog post from July 2014.
Yes, the post titled, Is Being Selfish a Negative All the Time? This post flips the script on how we view human motivation, especially when it comes to doing good deeds. He starts with the scenario we've all been in, providing an opinion or insight to a friend or family member who needs help. And then he asks a deceptively simple question, why? Why do we actually do it?
He introduces a thought experiment. He says, let us assume that every action we do is based off subconscious, selfish desires. This is a bold premise, and it echoes elements of psychological egoism, the theory that human conduct is fundamentally motivated by self-interest, even in seemingly altruistic acts. He suggests that for every piece of assistance we provide, we internally feel a sense of accomplishment or completion or validation. We get a hit of dopamine. We feel good about ourselves for being the good friend.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here, because I can imagine a listener pushing back on this immediately. We are taught from a very young age that true altruism has to be completely selfless. The idea is that if you get any joy or ego boost out of helping someone, it somehow taints the good deed. If we are only helping our friends because it gives us a dopamine hit, doesn't that make the friendship purely transactional? How does Bernansky reconcile this inherent self-interest with genuine care?
That is exactly the friction he is exploring. He acknowledges that society tells us selfishness is inherently toxic. But he asks a very cutting question. At what point does being selfish become a negative? Let's look at the actual outcome of the action. If your friend is struggling with a career decision, and you spend 3 hours talking them through it, and they end up getting a promotion, they benefit immensely. Now, if your primary drive for spending those 3 hours was so that you could smile at their personal success and growth, and feel pride that your advice helped them get there, is that really a negative?
So he's decoupling the motivation from the result. He's saying, who cares if your motivation was to feel like a superhero as long as the person actually got saved?
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture of societal ethics, it is a brilliant reframing of ego. He is arguing that if you help a friend or a family member achieve more, just so you can sit back and enjoy the warm glow of their happiness, that selfish desire to smile is entirely positive. Everyone needs a hand sometimes. If you're able to provide that hand, driven by a desire to enjoy their growth and validate your own wisdom, calling that a negative is a failure of perspective.
He essentially states that we need to embrace the role of the selfish mentor. He writes, is it not better to feel like a selfish friend who shares thoughts to potentially better a life than to be a selfish person who keeps all knowledge to themselves?
That is the crux of the argument. You have a choice between two types of selfishness in this world. The first is the selfishness of isolation. This is hoarding your knowledge, your time, and your resources to protect your own energy. The second is the selfishness of connection. This is expending your energy to help others, because watching them succeed makes you feel incredible. This concept can revolutionize how the listener approaches their relationships and their community.
I really want the listener to grasp the practical application of this. Think about how often you hesitate to offer help or advice because you don't want to seem arrogant, or you feel like maybe your motives aren't 100% pure. You think, well, I just want them to do it my way so I look smart. Bernansky is saying, take that desire to look smart and use it as fuel to be incredibly helpful.
I encourage you to stop feeling guilty if helping others boosts your ego. Embrace that feeling. Let that selfish desire to enjoy your friend's happiness and to feel accomplished drive you to be radically more generous with your time, your advice, and your support. If ego is the engine that drives generosity, let the engine run.
It makes so much sense when you look back at his list of constants from the first post. He says he will always love his family. He will always love hearing the excitement about life from his nieces and nephews. He wants to smile at strangers and talk to neighbors. His selfishness manifests as deep, community-driven generosity. He wants the people around him to thrive because a thriving community is a more enjoyable, stimulating environment for him to exist in. It is positive selfishness in action.
It creates a symbiotic loop. Your desire to feel good results in the tangible betterment of someone else's life, which in turn creates a better environment for you. This is the ultimate application of all that diverse knowledge we discussed earlier. The philosophy, the art, the AI technical skills, the lessons from Locke and Hitchcock and the Spartan races, they are not meant to be locked away in a brain box. They're meant to be shared selflessly to elevate the human experience of those around you.
So what does this all mean? We have covered a massive amount of ground today, pulling from deep philosophical musings, intense personal reflections, a wildly diverse professional background, and the strange beauty of a turntable in the sand. Let's synthesize this into a framework you can use today.
First, we have to challenge the don'ts. When you are presented with a boundary, whether in your career or your personal life, politely but firmly inquire if the consequence is really that bad. Shift from inherited knowledge to earned knowledge by conducting your own empirical risk assessments.
Second, redefine failure by applying the scientific method to your personal life. Strip the emotion away. Risk looking like an absolute fool to avoid the quiet, suffocating tragedy of living your life in a state of wondering. Choose the temporary sting of a miss over the permanent ache of stagnation, because the only true failure is not gathering new data.
Third, do not be afraid to combine your contrasting passions. Bring your indoor technology to the wet sand. Let your analytical mind and your artistic soul feed off one another. Be the polymath. Don't hide your hobbies from your professional life. Use them to build your unique edge.
And finally, aggressively pursue the selfish joy of helping others succeed. Let the dopamine hit of being a good friend drive you to be the most generous mentor you can be. As Bernansky reminds us, if we have anything at all, we have this life. All this philosophy, all this knowledge, all these deep dives you listen to is only valuable when it is actually applied to the messy, waking moments of your day.
It is about active, passionate participation in the human experience.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, yes, you listening, with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We talked earlier about the idea that your mind, once exposed to the ridiculous or the contradictory, can never go back to its old dimensions. It is permanently expanded. So I want you to think about this. If you were to intentionally expose yourself to one completely foreign, seemingly ridiculous idea or experience this week, something that totally contradicts your personal status quo, maybe a book you'd never normally read, a conversation with someone you fundamentally disagree with, or a hobby that feels completely out of character, how might that single moment of positive rebellion rewrite the entire next chapter of your life? Thank you so much for joining us at the table today for this deep dive into the source material. We hope you leave here ready to shout at the sky, and we wish you a truly grand time being alive.